Let's start with this 11th lunch talk from the Energy Poverty Advisory App. So my name is João Pedro Gouveia. I'm a principal researcher at Nova University of Lisbon and also part of the coordination team of the Energy Poverty Advisory App. And today with me, I have my colleague also Pedro Palma from EPAH team and from Nova University of Lisbon as well. Both of us will unfold a bit the new research we have been conducting on national indicators, on the new and revised EPAH dashboard on indicators, and also getting insights in looking a bit deeper into specific indicators we have newly brought to the discussion of energy poverty, or at least we made it accessible for everyone. So on the first part, I'll be exploring the new energy poverty indicators in the updated EPAH dashboard, where I'll showcase what are the new features of our tool, what how can you use it, how can you explore the data, and so on. And then Pedro will delve into our latest report, focusing on a selected energy poverty indicators, or either proxy or to bring more context on the problem. So this is one of our standard slides in EPAH, but I think it's always important to bring this to the attention of the participants here on this lunch talk. So energy poverty is a big social technical challenge with multiple dimensions. So it can be about space heating, it can be about space cooling, it can be about any other of our home energy services, and it tackles mostly vulnerable consumers. So we talk about the elderly, young people, disabled, migrants, and so on, affecting deeply our well-being and social inclusion. So this is something that's why it's also a big and difficult problem to understand and to diagnose, because it has multiple dimensions. So in 2022, in the end of last year, we have started working on a revision of previously used energy poverty indicators at the national scale, trying to identify the most recent data available, what are the key priority indicators people should be using, or local governments or countries. And with that, we have worked on and this was one of the lunch talks from last year as well, more or less at the same time as this one, where we explored a big revision of indicators, where we started with 28 indicators being previously identified by the predecessor of EPAH, the EPAH, the Energy Poverty Observatory. We have organized those indicators, converted them in total of 21 indicators. So common ones like the arrears on utility bills, the inability to keep the home adequately warm, or 2M/2, so low absolute energy expenditure or high energy share on income. So multiple indicators that people usually use for research and for on-the-ground action. We have renamed a couple of indicators to better align with what was stated in official statistics. We created a new round of indicators as well at the time, and we conducted an extensive revision of data. So we tried to go for the official sources and bring the most up-to-date data available. With that, we also brought a couple of new disaggregation on the inability to heat, on arrears, specifically on looking for two dimensions, the population being impacted, and also the household unit. So these are different numbers, and also trying to bring to the forefront not only the share of people that we usually see, but also the number, the absolute number, which of course that's who exactly is affected. We also at the time aligned with the Joint Research Center latest research with the USILC microdata to bring this level of knowledge on both population and households and more disaggregation. So what exactly we bring under the Energy Poverty Advisory App specifically on indicators? So we have created a dashboard where it's open, freely available, and includes overall national energy poverty related indicators. So we try to bring the best visualization process, easy to select indicators, easy to look into and explore the data, compare countries, choose disaggregations, indicators, dates, and so on. And one important thing is that we use EU official data. So this is coming from the databases from Eurostat or other related EU level data sets to bring this information to energy poverty experts and to energy poverty interested parties. So as you know, probably some of you working more on indicators and data, the use of indicators and its interpretation can be challenging. First to collect, then to maybe select, collect, and then also to understand exactly what that means in different contexts. So it's important to understand how to read, how to interpret, and then how to apply the data being offered by indicators, and on this case specifically by our dashboard to take action. So the dashboard is structured to provide easy access to relevant data to energy poverty diagnosis, which can be used directly within presentation of statistics. We have even sentences and easy messages to take away on other presentations, or even into research context to explore more the data, downloading what we have available there. So one of the interesting things we have brought on the dashboard, and it's one of the downloadable elements, is a one-page document where you can look it beside the maps and so on. I'll show you in a bit, but where you can have one single page on the definition of that specific indicator, on the numbers, on the latest numbers, both in a map and in a bar chart, and also limits of its applications, advantages, disadvantages, and examples highlighting the use for each of the indicators. So that was more or less the storyline for starting working on national indicators and providing easily available data to all. But then, because we were already aligning and working with the Covenant of Mayors, this is something critical at European level specifically, but to support signatories of the Covenant of Mayors in their planning and implementation on energy poverty. So the third pillar of the Covenant of Mayors, besides mitigation to climate change and adaptation to it, together with the Covenant of Mayors Europe office, also in cooperation with the Joint Research Center, as at the Energy Poverty Advisory Hub, we have worked together in last year to align and to better identify what might be the structure and the guidelines for energy poverty diagnosis at local scale. So with this idea, and knowing that we were mostly looking early on the dashboard for national indicators, we should have an alignment to trying to bridge the gap between different scales. So the local scale that mostly we are trying to support at the Advisory Hub, but also understanding how national indicators usually used for research and practice could be also aligned with at the local scale. So for that, the reporting guidelines on energy poverty from the Covenant of Mayors from last year provided a set of macro areas and examples of indicators that could be used at local scale. So in this direction, and to trying to align the work, we have during this year made this methodological framework of support also for using of indicators. So we reorganized fully our the indicators we were using before and were presenting before and the dashboard into 4 different areas. So those were areas already structured through the Covenant of Mayors guidelines, and we tried to bring the same idea and framework into the organization of our national indicators in the Advisory Hub indicators dashboard. So we have now, since 2 months ago when we launched the dashboard, the revised dashboard, we have indicators under climate, under facilities and housing, with subsections on building stock and energy consumption and equipment. Also on mobility, a hot topic coming also to energy poverty discussions. And then critical factors of characterization of families and households on socioeconomic aspects. So we have socioeconomic and living conditions related indicators. We have energy expenditure indicators, critical ones around the discussion of energy poverty, energy markets and prices, and also health. So a couple of indicators around consequences of energy poverty in households. And why this was done? Because one of the things we have been identifying also through one of our activities on technical assistance of local governments was this level of first, lack of knowledge on of course on diagnosing and indicators selection and identification, also lack of data availability. And this was a constraint, because if people and local governments and even national governments only align with the mostly used and at least historically mostly used energy poverty indicators, they might enter into a cornerstone, because data might not be available, data might be difficult to collect. So we try to broaden a bit the spectrum of options for local governments and national governments on diagnosis. So trying to align this with and structure this in key areas, so key important areas that diagnosis should cover. And this means also not only directly indicators for energy poverty measurement, but also context indicators, because to interpret an indicator and to interpret the vulnerability of some region, for example, to energy poverty, we need to know the climate. We need to know information about climate, about housing, about the infrastructures available, also about the profiles of energy consumption. So what type of fuels historically a country or a region uses. So all of this is relevant for conducting a thorough diagnosis and after a monitoring of energy poverty at multiple scales. So the idea behind this structure of indicators on topics and subtopics is to open a bit the options, which I'll talk a bit later, and Pedro as well, but also thinking that if you are starting a diagnosis at any scale, try to cover indicators and to select indicators that bring this, at least these 4 dimensions, maybe even with the covering the subtopics. So ultimately, if a local government selects and have information for 1 or 2 indicators that we bring in each of the areas, the end result for diagnosis and for understanding the situation it would be better. In theory, that's our idea. So what other improvements besides this idea of primary topics and subtopics we brought on this latest revision? So one was, in fact, we removed indicators previously reported on the dashboard. And why? And what were they? Two indicators, though: the number of rooms per person by ownership status, and also dwellings in populated areas. And what was the reasoning? And we explained this deeply in our report that accompanies this release. But it's because these are indicators that we brought to disaggregation. So these standalone indicators were not exactly super relevant for energy poverty diagnosis by themselves, but they are relevant if crossed with other indicators for a deeper understanding of the problem. So for example, if I have number of rooms per person by ownership status as a disaggregation under the inability to heat the home, it might bring an additional insight into that discussion. So that was our idea. So we didn't remove them totally. We just brought them as new disaggregations in other more relevant indicators. And then another key, trying to get more and more information for diagnosis and for experts at different scales. We also brought from official statistics new disaggregations. So relevant, we thought relevant for energy poverty discussion. So we brought information on age, sex, income quintiles, household composition, tenor status, also some spatial scale detail when available by NUTS region, and also the degree of urbanization. So a couple of them are available now at the risk of poverty and social exclusion indicator for a deeper understanding of the problems in different areas. Also on the inability to keep the home adequately warm, and ultimately on the population living in dwellings with presence of leak, damp, and rot, which is also a structural and fundamental issue of a driver of energy poverty in our homes, so the energy efficiency of the building stock. Then two technical things and one more relevant that Pedro will discuss a bit. So we changed the code of the previously used at risk of poverty and social exclusion indicator. And why? Because we wanted to align this with the EU pillar of social rights, and they were using slightly different indicators. So ultimately it's the same thing. The numbers are marginally different, and we thought this was relevant to align to the future, even to the EU 2030 targets on social rights. So with the focus on the poverty and the social exclusion. So tiny changes on the number that you might check if you compare the previously available data and the new one. And then another thing we thought was relevant was to bring a new organization to the energy prices part. So before the different fuels were considered as standalone indicators. So we had an indicator for household electricity prices, another one for natural gas prices, another one for biomass, another one for fuel, oil, and coal, and district heating. And this, in fact, is part of a broader indicator of energy prices. So that's the new structure we have conveyed now. So we have one called energy price, and then you can choose which type of fuel you want to know more about. So this is something that we thought was relevant also to simplify the message and to better understand and compare prices of different fuels. And then the new indicators part. So that Pedro will talk. I'll just bring here two things. One, and the overall structure. So this is what we have now on the EPAH dashboard. So we have 4 new topics plus 5 subtopics, the ones I mentioned about health, about energy markets and energy prices. So overall, the new revised version from October 2023 has 29 indicators spread across these different 4 topics and 5 subtopics. So when looking to the dashboard specifically, and this was a bit of the storyline of the change for you also to understand when using the data, is we have this information in the dashboard that can be easily available per indicator. So you can choose one specific indicator, and then you can look also into a specific country. I bring you just a screenshot of a French example for the climate. So we have the information there. You can choose the specific year. We can compare, therefore, countries and indicators data and explore different disaggregations on each of the indicators. So the idea is that this feature enhances the ability to compare data and better understand different characteristics of either a specific EU country or by looking into detail on a specific indicator selected. And then another relevant thing we brought last year, and it's also available for the new indicators we brought now, it's the limits, which is something we thought always to be relevant to explain, not only for experts, but for maybe more for others. It's what people should be aware on this section of the bear in mind section, what we should be aware when looking into and using data from that specific indicator. What are the drawbacks? What are the advantages, and so on? And this is deeply explored, not only in this bear in mind section on the dashboard, where you can see each of the indicators with that short paragraph of highlighted information, but more deeply on 2 reports, one from October 2022 and another one from October 2023, called the Energy Poverty National Indicators. The first one was Insights for More Effective Measuring. The second, Uncovering New Possibilities for Expanded Knowledge. Pedro will talk about those in a minute. And my last slide before moving to Pedro, it's just for you to have a visualization on what is the dashboard and what is available. So you can start looking for an indicator by topic. So if you only want to look and explore facilities and housing, you just can click on one area, and then you get constrained by the indicators chosen. If not to browse by topic, you can just directly select by indicator, even by data source when it's available. For example, when we have Eurostat directly available data in some disaggregations, or focusing on the population, for example, or if you want JRC, more detailed disaggregation on households, for example. And then here on this green box, you can see we provide where is the information coming from, where is the major units being used, the latest updates, and then multiple options for download. So you can explore and download as a CSV or Excel file the raw data. You can extract the map available like this one, and then you can extract the map, graph, and info in a kind of a brochure or leaflet for a specific indicator, as I bring you as an example on the right here. So here you have the national indicator, inability to keep the home adequately warm, where you can have the official definition of it, or when not available, an official one, the closer to the most comprehensive and clear definition being used. Then a set of limits. We explore, as I mentioned, on the reports in detail, the latest numbers, both in the share, also in absolute terms, and then examples of use. like what exactly this means and how they can be interpreted. So this is what we have currently online. So you can visit our dashboard currently under observatory, so where we have information about indicators and diagnoses and so on. So I invite you to explore. But now, before that, I'll end on to Pedro. Maybe I can pass your slide to just tell me and I move on, Pedro.
Okay.
So welcome. Thank you for participating here on this session.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Hello all. So I'll be talking a little bit about our work with new EPAH indicators, focusing on the national indicators reports, particularly going over the applications and the limitations of the different indicators. Before starting and going into more depth into the indicators, I'll just like to say a few words on the importance of spatial scale. So we call these national indicators mostly because the data that we have available at the UI data sets, it's mostly national level data. So what happens is these indicators, we call them national, but they are perfectly good to be used at different spatial scales. So they could also be called energy poverty indicators, just to mention this. And also to say that diagnosis really needed at different scales. So national scale, it's super important to understand that, to see to evaluate the problem, to see the dimension of the problem, to set wider targets and policy frameworks. But local scale and regional scale is equally as important, if not more, really to understand the specificities of the problem, the configurations of the problem across in different locations, the characteristics of the population, the vulnerable households. So it's very important to detect these vulnerable groups and to monitor levels, energy poverty levels as well. And local authorities have the experience, have the proximity to the population, which provides them a great advantage. So they could use these tools really to better target and propose policies and measures that are effective in targeting the population and mitigating this problem. So next slide, please. So in this presentation, I'll mostly focus on our latest report, Energy Poverty National Indicators, which uncovering new possibilities for expanded knowledge, which is the base work also for the dashboard. This is a follow-up work or work building up previous work that we already conducted, specifically another report, the Energy Poverty National Indicators, Insights for More Effective Measuring, that was published in October 2022. And I'll just go very briefly mention what we did in this first report. We already did a lunch talk on this work, but just so you get a context of the work that we did. So what we did was we did review of national indicators that had been selected by the Energy Poverty Observatory. Then we tracked down the original data sets and updated these indicators. And then we did this analysis of their strengths, their limitations, and also the application cases, always ultimately to really create this toolkit of this diverse toolkit with micro indicators, a comprehensive framework really to support member states or other entities in their endeavor to diagnose energy poverty, and specifically in the national strategies in the case of member states. So next slide, please. So regarding the new report or our latest report, what we did, and João already mentioned this, so I'll cover this fast. So we did an update of the new dimensions. We included new dimensions. We included new indicators. We removed redundant indicators. We did a rearrangement of the codes, different disaggregations, and then we conducted a similar analysis that we had done for the first report, but in this report only for the new indicators that we included, also focusing on their strengths, their limitations, applications, and so on. And the goal, like it was in the first one, is really to deepen the knowledge on energy poverty measurement, to broaden the knowledge, broaden the measurements, to ultimately really to provide policymakers, researchers, practitioners with useful information and useful tools to go about the diagnosis in their jurisdictions. These are the new indicators that we included in 11 in total. So just briefly to mention them. So in the topic of climate, we included the cooling and heating degree days. In the facilities and housing, we included the final energy consumption in households by energy use and by type of fuel, and as well population considering their dwelling as too dark. Then in the mobility topic, which is It's a component, an important component, also mentioned in the literature, of an important intersection with energy poverty, transport poverty. In this topic, we included the indicator population who cannot afford regular use of public transports. Then on the socioeconomic aspects, we included indicator causes of death, population reporting chronic disease, disaggregated by type of disease. This is an important detail. The disposable annual household income, housing cost over burden rates, and also the final consumption expenditure of households. So next slide. We picked only 3 of these indicators to kind of give you a view of an idea of the type of analysis that we do in a report. We invite you to read the report and to get more detailed information. But we chose 3 indicators. Before going into each of them, I would just like to say that these indicators, when used alone, they do not provide a comprehensive or a very accurate picture of energy poverty. They should be integrated in a diverse, comprehensive framework of including more indicators, really to get a more comprehensive view of the problem. But still, they really provide added value, added information that can be useful, and it can bring extra value to a framework of measurement framework. So focusing on the first one, I chose the final energy consumption households by energy, fuel, and energy use and fuel. So this indicator really provides us with an understanding of how energy is consumed in the homes. It can help uncover abnormally low or abnormally high consumptions for a given energy service, either it's heating or cooling or lighting, etc. So these are potential effects of energy poverty. So they can give us a hint on potential situation of energy poverty. Then can also give us information on the use of cheap and clean fuels, fuel availability, dependency. There's different things that we can do with this indicator. We can compare it to a reference value to see if something is wrong or not. We can use this indicator to calculate other indicators. For instance, we can use this indicator to calculate energy expenditure. And then in each indicator, we also included this little example, almost like an anecdotal example of how to look at it, like a recommendation of how to analyze it, how to look at it, or even sometimes a kind of in a cautionary way of looking at and analyzing this indicator. So in this case, for instance, thinking about a household, in a large family household in a cold region, a poor insulated home, if we see that this household has an average household energy consumption, maybe there's a potential situation of energy poverty. It would be expected with these conditions that this household would have a higher energy consumption. So this is a hint. Is it enough to say that this household is in energy poverty? No, we need more indicators. We need to, again, the wide framework, but it's a hint that we should pursue and check if something is happening there. So second indicator, heating and cooling degree days. Again, this indicator provides us an insight into climate variables, building energy needs for heating and cooling. It's useful to estimate, for instance, the effects of climate change. Not so effective at capturing short-time temperature fluctuations, for instance, within a day, and also does not consider building energy efficiency and energy affordability, which are very important aspects of the problem of energy poverty. But again, it can provide an important information on the climate variables part in building energy needs. Then another small example to illustrate how this indicator could be perceived or analyzed. So 2 households in 2 similar well-insulated homes in regions with different heating degree day values. So the household in a region with highest heating degree day probably will have higher vulnerability than the other household. Again, this is if we control for the other variables. We always have to look at the other variables. But in a situation that all the variables are the same, all the conditions are the same, and only the climate changes, of course, higher heating degree days will mean higher energy needs and probably higher vulnerability. Just a small simplified example. Next slide, please. And lastly, the population reporting a chronic disease. Chronic diseases can be either symptoms or drivers of energy poverty. So they can be caused by a problem of energy poverty. They can also amplify the problem, a magnified problem of energy poverty. These are complex phenomena. It's hard really to prove connection, a robust connection, that they really intersect with many other aspects, vulnerability factors like income, social inequalities. And also these are self-reports, which are very useful, very important. But when we look at self-reports, that can also happen that sometimes people with disease do not report that they have the disease. So it's important to complement them also with medical reports. So just another example of how to use this indicator, how to look at this indicator really. Homes with poor ventilation and heating are more likely to have mold growth, damp, and poor air quality, which are signs of energy poverty. And there might be a link here between the deteriorating dwelling, the situation where the energy poverty, and the occurrence of, for instance, respiratory diseases. So this is a link, a connection that should be pursued and investigated if this happens. Next slide, please. So just a final slide with just a few wrap-up points. So there are advantages there are limitations of using these EU-wide data sets, as I mentioned. We always promote the mixed indicators approach. So using, like I said, and I restep on this point, really using a framework that encompasses very varied indicators, diverse indicators. Then I would say also it's important to complement this EU-wide data sets with national data sources, which can provide information on additional indicators. Then again, the question of scale, looking at the indicators at national scale and also regional and local, so important to have this crossover assessment. Then also I would highlight that it's important to have indicators that portray the same sample of households, same sample of regions. So you have indicators, you have data that you can connect. So if you have data for one sample of households, another indicator for another sample, you cannot establish connections. So if you have data and indicators that really, and several indicators that you can, that portray like a sample of population, a sample of households, you can establish correlations between them, can establish causation relationship between them. So this is very important also to kind of go a bit deeper into why vulnerability happens, what causes it, what are the effects, and really get a more complete picture of the problem. And then finally, again, the problem of data gaps, data availability, it's always a problem across regions, across countries. So we always also encourage to propose new data development strategies to collect data, to really not only get more data, more indicators, but also data that is more adapted or more viable or better data actually to portray the problem that we want to address, which is the energy poverty. Because most of these indicators, also the data is very useful. It can be used, but some of these indicators, the data is not really collected to measure energy poverty. So if you have data collected precisely with that purpose, it'll always be a really important step to create a very or a more effective measurement framework.